It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts. I'm your host, Mainz, and my colleague in the danger zone in Rainford, it's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
It's got dark awfully quickly here tonight, which I'm sure everyone's absolutely gripped to hear, especially if they're not going to be listening to this tonight. But it literally, the sun just, it didn't go down, it just disappeared. I'm concerned.
Let's be honest, if the apocalypse was coming, it's probably right that it should. So, hold your loved ones close and, hope, just pretend that you would have won that fantasy draft that you've just done recently.
Can you imagine if the apocalypse were coming and one of the last things you chose to do was listen to us two waffle? What would that say about you the rest of your life that you arrived at that decision point?
I think if you were listening to us right now, you didn't know the apocalypse was coming.
Yeah,
and
I think we
we've just told you, and then you've checked Twitter or something, and someone else has highlighted it, and you've gone, bollocks, I need to listen to something better than these two clowns.
Yeah, I've literally, to quote comic book guy from The Simpsons, I've wasted my life.
Comic book guy, what a legend. What a legend. Neil, absolutely fantastic show. We've got an interview with the brilliant Terez Paylor, senior NFL writer for Yahoo Sports, and a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. We're going to talk to him about that voting process, about Antonio Brown, and also who's next on the list of players to get their big deal. This week, in the preview world, it's the AFC South. We're going to talk, obviously, Texans, Colts, Jags and Titans. Some of these teams will be good. One of these teams has a chance to be the worst in the world.
The best thing about doing the preview for the AFC South is that three of the teams literally come after each other alphabetically. So if you're going through,
right?
It is. So if you're going through draft guides or whatnot, then literally it's there's Houston, there's Indy, then Jacksonville, and now you've got to scroll the pages before you get to Tennessee. But
it's proper peculiar. Do you think they knew they were doing it?
Probably not, when you consider that Houston only came in 2002, and before that Tennessee had been Houston. So I think there's
it's wild. It's wild. It is wild though. But there you go. It's good stuff. So first up, we're gonna stop the show. We're gonna dive back in time, our time, to this afternoon. We've got to talk to the brilliant Terez Paylor. Enjoy the interview. It is wonderful. I know that because I already know what happens. Enjoy. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mainz and Dutts, it's a privilege to have Terez Paylor, senior NFL writer for Yahoo Sports, host of the Yahoo NFL podcast, and our first Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. Welcome, Terez. I hope you're okay today.
Thank you, guys. How you doing today?
We're okay. Not quite fully locked down, but still in our houses. On that kind of situation, has this, from a reporting point of view, been the weirdest off-season ever? I mean, it feels like, from our point of view, that it's been about 3 million years since the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. There's a lot of things that have happened or not happened since that happened. How's it been for you?
It's definitely been the weirdest off-season that I've experienced, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, this is a great time of year to go travel and build sources and meet players and meet executives and that type of deal. And, there hasn't really been any of that since March. So you're just kind of relying on your phone calls and the people you already know. But, it's unfortunate that we're dealing with this pandemic from a grand sense because it's terrifying. But, from a work point of view, you just try to make it work the best you can, and this has definitely been a weird year for sure.
I suppose it must help, in the sense that the job you are well connected. You do have people people you can speak to for most teams, whereas there may be some, budding reporters who haven't had a chance to build up this network or this rapport with people. So the fact that you have covered the game for so long, it's not a normal situation, but it does give you a slight advantage over some other people.
Yeah, I would say that the longer you cover it, the better off you are in regards to that, because source building is hard in this league. And, it's a numbers game, but it's also a time game. So like the longer you're in it, the more people you meet. And there are certainly people who've been covering it longer than me, like Peter King, right? Like, Peter's been doing this as long as I've been born. So, he's going to get more. And that's just how that goes. But you just do the best you can every day, let the chips fall where they may. That's been a good approach for me my whole career, and I'm going to keep riding that philosophy.
I do have to say as well, Terez, just slightly off topic. There's a few like TV shows or movies or podcasts even where like one phrase becomes popular and synonymous with that. And I have to say the emphasis you put on the phrase when you say something sucks it just brings joy to my blackened heart. I've never heard so much anger if you say it sucks. It's beautiful. It's podcasting gold.
Well, I think I appreciate that, but I think it's because it's just so genuine. Like you can tell, like when I break that out, like I really mean it. Like something stinks, and that's because I feel it. I feel it in my soul, and I want people to feel that the same way I feel it. So I'm glad that resonates with you because that's definitely one of my favorite sayings.
One bit of news that has actually occurred in the last few days. Patrick Mahomes, obviously a few weeks ago, came into some money, and now he started spending it. How do you? I mean, obviously hopefully he's going to be busy for quite a bit of the time for most of the year. But do you think he's going to be like an active owner of the Kansas City Royals, or do you think this is just something nice to do with his money?
I mean, I could see it being something where, as time goes on, he becomes a little bit more active. There's no doubt that his number one priority is the game of football and maximizing his legacy and winning as many titles as possible and going for like the Mount Rushmore of football, right? Going to be one of the GOATs, right? With Jerry Rice and Jim Brown and Joe Montana and Tom Brady. So, if that's his priority, I have a hard time believing he's going to be extremely active with baseball. I do think he'll help them, right? I'm sure that, he'll make some appearances. I'm sure there's a push to build a new stadium. He'll be visible for that, right? Because Mahomes has an extraordinary amount of goodwill in Kansas City. He will until the day he dies. So it's a smart partnership from the Royals' perspective, but also on Mahomes, like, as he starts trying to build like generational wealth, the type of wealth that people in this country with real money have, owning a sports franchise or even a piece of it is about as safe as you can go. So he's tied to this community now. He'll be tied to it for a long time. And, it's only going to grow as he continues to win games. And I'm sure he's going to do a lot of that over the next decade plus.
With camp about to start and given the restrictions the reporters are going to have, how do you think this will affect your reporting on camps? I mean, we're very sad to hear that the Terez training camp tour won't be taking place this year. So how will you get your information on what's going on in those facilities? Yeah,
that's a tough blow because I enjoyed those. Now, look, the tour wore me out. Like, it wiped me out. Charles went on his tour and it wiped him out, but there's no telling, like, there's no doubt how helpful they were to helping us build sources and like come away with information and helping people win fantasy leagues too. Like I came into these, I wanted to come out of all those stops with like a little fantasy tip for people. And like the one that just keeps coming to mind for me was Mark Andrews, the tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. I told you he was going to be good. And also Terry McLaurin too. Like, you can get some really good, like, fantasy intel, and I tried to share that because I know that's why most people love football. So now it's going to be different. I'm going to try to do interviews over the phone. I can ask some of the same questions, but, the hope is that, I can at least do a reasonable facsimile of it over the next month or so. But it won't quite be the same, that's for sure.
I suppose just like most of them, isn't it? We'll adapt. It's just a question of, again, if you've built up the sources, you've got these contacts, you'll adapt better than the likes of me and Paul, who are just sitting there desperately hoping that someone like yourself or Jimmy Kempski for the Philly voice up here, they drop us this little nugget about a sleeper that we can take forward in our fantasy draft.
Yeah. But I feel like we're all just trying to. I mean, we all need them to play games. So let's be very clear here. Like most reporters, even though like we're obligated to tell the truth and be honest with people about the challenges the league is facing and how difficult it's going to be to like finish the season. Like we do want to, like we need the games to get played. So we're all kind of I mean, in the hierarchy of the league, we're dependent on these executives and scouts to give us information, just like you guys are dependent on reporters to give you information. So it's funny, like in life, like, there's always someone a little better or someone a little bigger, someone who knows a little bit more or whatever, right? And so trust me, we don't think about how much we know. We're thinking about how little we know compared to the people we cover and how we can get more information about the people we cover so that we can be more relevant. So it's funny you put it that way, but it's not really something we can think about because we always are like, God, I got to get better source. I got to know more. And it's just a never ending cycle.
I mean, it's just when my fantasy team sucks this year, I don't want to be the one to have to take all the blame. I have to have people I can reach out and say, well, they didn't tell me this, or I didn't read about that.
That's funny.
And I'm sure you gave Terez a load of credit last year when you took Mark Andrews in a load of fancy drafts, right?
I never stopped praising Terez for that tip.
Told you, Mark Andrews, Terry McLaurin. It sucks. Like it really does, man. Because I know people enjoy those little tips. I'm gonna do the best I can, but we'll have to see. It's just gonna be a different year.
I mean, speaking about the uncertain times. Obviously, this week we've seen the first batch of players opting out of the 2020 season. Now, one thing that before all these players opted out, one thing that I think I heard you and Charles on the Yahoo NFL podcast talk about was teams with strong locker rooms, with strong senior veteran players. Those players are going to be so important to get the youngsters on board about saying, look, you're going to have to make sacrifices. This is what you're going to have to do. But you look at a team like the Patriots, and they've lost a couple of those, big name veterans who would have been the ones to, keep the youngsters on the straight and narrow. There's going to be teams that are going to suffer from that, especially if big name players do sit out. But I think if we were to look at one team that has a culture of, no, you will come in and just do as you are told, the Patriots are probably in as good a position as you can probably be. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. The Patriots don't mess around. That's Belichick's. That's Belichick's locker room in a way, and he's won so much they can't help but kind of fall in line. It's like, playing for the Patriots is like joining the Marines. So you're gonna get in line. Like, remember when Antonio Brown was there for like a week last year, like he was actually behaving and stuff. So, and giving very sullen interviews and like not tweeting. So, I feel like most teams are going to need that strong locker room because they don't have like the greatest coach of all time. But I think the Patriots, they're going to be fine. They're good. I know they're losing some valuable veterans, but Charles and I covered this on the pod too. Like, Belichick drafted like all defense this year except for those tight ends. And like, there's young talent ready to step in. Guys who like physically look like carbon copies of guys who are sitting out. So, I mean, they might struggle a little early as those youngsters get like experience. But I mean, Belichick can really, really teach, even virtually. So they're not going to have a losing record. Like, that's not going to happen. And they're probably going to be better than people think, especially if Cam Newton ends up being the comeback player of the year, which is something if I were just a fan, I would put money on that. Like I could see him in that system. He's going to be used well. Like, I don't ever count out the Patriots. Don't ever do that.
I think it's one of those you and Charles have, certainly stressed since the whole, Tom Brady not being there. Even when Jared Stidham was, everyone knew he was going to start. You were the first two and quite vocal people to say the Patriots are not going to suck. Bill Belichick doesn't do tanking. He doesn't do sucking. He's going to. Me and Paul have said for weeks, we're happy to be a year late in declaring the Patriots dynasty over. So until further notice, we'll just pencil them in for 11 wins a season, and we can get on with our lives.
That's the way to go. Trust me, you don't want to be on that train. You don't want to be the guy assuming that they're going to be bad. Like let somebody else do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Terez, this off-season we've seen Myles Garrett, Patrick Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey all land big paydays after being drafted in 2017. We should assume, I guess, that Jamal Adams is next on the list, given the leverage he's got now with the multiple first-round draft picks that Pete and John Snyder gave away. I guess, who do you believe is the next domino to fall on that? I guess, there's Watson, Tre'Davious White, George Kittle, and obviously Mitchell Trubisky.
Well, I heard that there was a little push to get Watson done, so his money's going to be significant. Now that Mahomes is done, there's kind of like an outline for like what you could do with him. I wouldn't expect it to be as team friendly. That's not something you can depend on. And to be fair, like Mahomes is the highest paid American athlete like ever. So the funny thing is that he could have took the Chiefs for more. I think we all recognize that. Like, now, would that have potentially hurt his legacy because the players around him wouldn't be as good? Yeah. And it shows how much Mahomes cares about having his guys around him and also winning games. That he didn't just say, you know what, I want a fully guaranteed contract for $400 million and just push for it. Because what were the Chiefs really going to do? Like, you really going to let that guy get to a franchise tag? Like, no, you're not. So, but Mahomes understands what this is. Like, he understands it's a team game. I think it's going to be interesting to see where Watson ends up coming in. It's not out of the question that he would do a deal where he gets more money over the first couple of years than Mahomes does. You can't expect Watson to take that kind of deal that's structured so friendly to the team. But the money it shouldn't be Mahomes' money in totality, but APY, it might get close. I would expect him to get done. The 49ers need to take care of Kittle too, because he's a special player and he's still right in his prime. You don't want to let feelings of contempt set in with your best players, because it does tend to rub off on the field and affect the way they play. So it's hard to say exactly which one's going to come now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Watson was the next big domino to fall.
I mean, the thing you say there about, Mahomes could have taken them for more money, and then the Chiefs would have been forced to, strip the team of assets just to pay him. That's pretty much what the Texans have been doing anyway, without having to pay Deshaun Watson.
I mean, pretty much, right? So, that's so funny. Bill O'Brien, the fact that they didn't even get a first round pick for DeAndre Hopkins is a crime. But I'm actually a little worried about their defense. I think their offense is going to be okay. Like all their receivers can really run deep, and it's a vertical based offense. I actually think they're going to put up points. I'm just kind of worried about their defense. I'm just not. I think that defense is getting old quickly, and they're very quickly kind of getting to the point where they don't have enough impact players to be able to stop people consistently. So that's a tough division too. I think the Colts are going to bounce back. The Titans are in there. I don't know, man. We could see a bit of a return to earth for Houston this year.
Last week, Terez, Antonio Brown retired again, then came back, then retired again, presumably. I don't know. I can't keep up. And our group of friends, we entered into this discussion of, well, is he a Hall of Famer? Now, speaking as someone who, I'm not saying he is at the moment, but in a few years when eventually he does become up for it, you hopefully by that time will still be one of the voices who decides that. Can you just explain to us, what it is actually like, and briefly, obviously don't want to keep you here for hours, but as someone who has one of the votes, what is it like? Just turn up and start shouting names at each other? Presumably, there is a process and a debate that goes on for these names.
Yeah, there is. It's not like just some like wild kind of process. So basically we narrow the list down of Hall of Fame eligible players from 100 to 25. in the fall. And then, we vote on, the 15 guys we're going to talk about in the meeting. So the meeting's held the day before the Super Bowl every year in the Super Bowl city. And basically each of the 15 Hall of Fame finalists, we go, they have a presenter among the 48 reporters in the room. So let's say Tony Gonzalez, a year ago, I got up and I gave a 5-minute speech introducing the other, giving his case to be voted into the Hall of Fame. And at that point, others can ask questions, others can speak on it, and then we move on to the next guy, and then we just vote from that point. Who are the top 10 guys from that 15? Boom, that gets counted. All right, who are the top 10 guys? Who are the top 5 guys from that 10? Then it gets counted down to that. And those are the 5 that end up getting in eventually. It's a simplistic process, but it's hard to get in. And I actually think I think Antonio Brown, his case is pretty strong, should be airtight. He was an all-decade receiver in a time where they threw more than ever. And his Hall of Fame score, and on my I have a little chart that I use to help, database I use to help compare candidates. His score is better than Calvin Johnson. So he should be a Hall of Famer and probably should be first ballot. But there's 2 things. Obviously, his behavior the last few years is probably going to hurt him with some in the room. And also, receivers typically have to wait because there's so many of them that deserve to get in. And there's typically a bit of a waiting list. So if Terrell Owens had to wait 3 years, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Antonio Brown at least has to wait 1 or 2, right? So, but he should get in. I think he will get in. Just the case is too strong. As a football player, he was too great. And I think that's how that'll shake out. But I honestly don't know how long it's going to take him just because of the insanity of the last few years.
I think it's a question on the, I think, good use of phrase, insanity of the last few years, right? Is that, as you quite rightly pointed out, Terez, that you're not really supposed to take into account off the field stuff. But it's difficult not to especially in this kind of situation. So you would expect that some people in the room, whether that be you or anybody else, would say, "Yeah, he may be a Hall of Famer, but I really didn't like how he behaved in 2-3 years or whatever. So therefore, I'm not going to vote for him, for a few years because I think that is the kind of thing that needs to be taken into account."
Yeah. And the argument some people will make is that sometimes this off-field stuff affects what happens on the field. And the reason I didn't buy that for Terrell Owens was because he was there basically every Sunday killing it. So, but Brown, there's instances of him missing games and not even getting there's stuff there with him that you can make an argument has affected, what happened on Sunday, but I'm not really going to pay a whole lot of attention to that, to be honest. I'm going to vote for the 5 best guys when he comes up for it. And there's a pretty good chance he'll be in that 5, although you never know. It could be like a loaded year. If there's a receiver that's really been waiting that really deserves to get in, I'll probably and their resume is close, I might prioritize them just to get them in. But, I don't think there's any doubt he'll make the Hall of Fame. It's just a matter of when. And I'm not really into penalizing guys too much for this, that, and the third. It's about what you do on the field. And there's no doubt that for a decade, he was an elite, dominant receiver.
Fantastic. Well, Terez, we know you're a busy man, so we thank you very much for the time you've given us today. We really appreciate it. And we hope to speak to you soon.
All right. Appreciate it, guys. Take care. Stay safe.
And that was the brilliant Terez Paylor there, laughing at Houston and thinking Antonio Brown is a Hall of Famer.
It's as I say, as I pointed out, I heartily recommend anyone to listen to the Yahoo NFL podcast, also the Yahoo Fantasy Football podcast with friends of this pod, Liz Loza and Matt Harmon, because you truly have to hear Terez say something sucks to appreciate how good it is.
You've never known anything sucks until Terez tells you it sucks.
No, it doesn't suck until Terez says it does.
And there we go. And you can't really argue with anything like that, can you? So Neil, let's get on with the AFC South preview. 4 teams as always. We're going to give a big question, a fantasy sleeper, and then discuss their schedule and over-under and whether they will be more likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all. Not at all means they're a middling team, of course. First team on the docket this week, the Houston Texans. And the big question, which I think is the big question every year, will the GM get the coach fired?
The Houston Texans traded away DeAndre Hopkins and got an absolute bacon sandwich in return, basically.
No, they didn't get a bacon sandwich because I like bacon sandwiches. They got a bacon sandwich without the bacon.
They got a ham sandwich and only one piece of bread. Would it therefore shock you? Bear in mind that the reason they gave is that they didn't want to get into a situation where they'd have to pay DeAndre Hopkins, even though he had 3 years left on a team-friendly deal. Would it therefore shock you if I told you that the Texans have the third most of their salary cap, have the third highest amount of salary cap devoted to the wide receiver position in the NFL, and that does not include DeAndre Hopkins?
How?
Because they have 3 wide receivers that they are paying more than $6 million in 2020. Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks, and Will Fuller. You cannot tell me that the amount of money you are paying those 3 makes up apparently for not wanting to pay DeAndre Hopkins. So I think therefore we can conclude that the DeAndre Hopkins contract was bollocks.
Yeah, well, we know that, right? And this is the fatal flaw when there's no hierarchy in any organisation. This is not a Houston conversation. Is that if you piss off the coach, that doesn't mean you get traded in most situations, because there's a GM and an owner who will deal with these kind of situations and make sure it's all okay. If there's no GM and that coach and GM are the same person, that's quote unquote 2 voices telling the owner to get rid of this guy. And that's what happened with DeAndre Hopkins. As you said, complete bullshit on the contract situation. It was a personality clash, and you would hope that your GM / coach will be the bigger person. He wasn't, and the Houston Texans are paying the price for it. Because let's be honest, Fuller's never fit, Cooks is okay, and Randall Cobb is 75 years of age.
And the problem that we have is that, as I say, they're devoting all this money to the wide receiver position. They've taken on board an obscene running back contract for a running back that hasn't been good for 4 years. They have the second most amount of salary cap space devoted to the offensive line in the NFL, but a large chunk of that obviously is Laramie Tunsil. Their offensive line is getting better, but your defense is a Greek tragedy. And again, that has not been addressed. That has been left to fester because the GM is an offensive coach. So
Terez highlighted this, Dutton, in the interview earlier, right? Everyone talks about the Hopkins thing and everyone talks about the offense. And the elephant in the room is the defense is old and getting worse, and they didn't do anything about it.
No. So you've got a quarterback who is going to want paying, let's be honest, because where else do you go? But as I say, you've amassed these high-priced wide receivers. You spent all this money on the offensive line. Yeah, that's great. Next year, you're going to have to pay Deshaun Watson, which means, okay, now we're probably going to need to make some difficult choices. And what are you going to give Deshaun Watson? Because you're paying top dollar for wide receivers now that you shouldn't be paying top dollar for. Because you can, and next year when you can't, you won't be able to pay anyone. And therefore, you're going to say to Deshaun, okay, Josh Norris makes this point every single time on the Roto World. If you watch the Texans offense, and this was with DeAndre Hopkins, everything looked complicated. There was nothing easy. There was nothing simple. It was a case of literally, we're going to get to 3rd and long and Deshaun. But that's not a strategy. I mean, annoyingly, it is for Seattle, and they do it for Russ Wilson all the time. But obviously, the Texans want to do exactly the same. Well, you don't make it easy for them. You don't have genuine game-changing wide receivers anymore. But you're going to hope that Deshaun Watson makes, chicken soup out of chicken shit. and your defense is terrible, so you're going to have to get into shootouts, which means you're going to have to be passing more, which means you're going to expose this improving offensive line to a pass rush when you've got a quarterback who's going to hold on to the ball too long anyway because he wants to make plays. It's a recipe for disaster. It really is.
It's a wild team, and it's one of those teams where you're like, in 3 years, someone will be like, God, this team needs a total overhaul, and we need to change everything about it apart from the quarterback, who, by the way, based on the fact what Patrick Mahomes got, is going to earn $500 million over a 10-year deal. So, cool story, guys, but you know, you may be okay this year, but this is only going one way for me, and it's down.
One fact that I found, and this is again from the Sharp Football Preview, is that before last season, if Deshaun Watson was trailing at half-time, he was 0-8. After last season, he's now 4-13. But again, this shows you, and we saw the classic example of this was the Denver game last year, that there are times when opponents turn up and have the pants off the Texans, and the Texans dig themselves into a massive hole and leave themselves with too much to do. That happens too often to be a coincidence. So you have to put that down. And it's discipline, which is a coaching issue. So GM is terrible, and the coach makes too many mistakes. So just have to wait out.
This is going well. Neil, they do have a tier 1 / tier 2 QB. So who's the fantasy sleeper who will be paired with him?
The fantasy sleeper, and this really is, this is the lady's choice. Which wide receiver do you think is going to get the bulk of the targets now DeAndre Hopkins has gone? Because to be honest, they're all at value. I mean, Will Fuller is wide receiver 31. Brandon Cooks is wide receiver 35. Kenny Stills, is wide receiver 73. And Randall Cobb is wide receiver 75. Well, what do you want in a wide receiver at that range? What are you looking for? Do you want a boom-bust wide receiver 3 who could occasionally have wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 1 weeks? Then that's Will Fuller. He's going at wide receiver 31. That's great. Do you want someone who may soak up the middle of the field targets that DeAndre Hopkins might have done? That's probably Randall Cobb. He's wide receiver 75. These are not picks to go out and get absolutely excited about. Come away from your draft saying, can't believe I got them. But for the price they are paying in a team that, as I say, they're going to have to pass. The volume is there. It really is. Well, which do you want?
Neil, the over-under for the Texans is 7.5. If you like watching the Texans on Red Zone at 6 p.m. UK time, you are in for a treat this year. First game they play is Sunday Night Football against it's not Sunday Night Football, is it? It's the first game of the new season against the Chiefs at home. Congratulations, you've lost. They then play the Ravens at 9:25, and they then have no other game right now that isn't at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. UK time. And they also play the Thanksgiving game against Detroit this year. Interesting. Yeah, over-under is 7.5. Are they more likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
Well, the annoying thing that they have shown they can do under Bill O'Brien is qualify for the playoffs. So you'd have to say that probably they are, you would assume, unless there is a massive drop-off. If Deshaun Watson's leg falls off, for example, then this team's going 2-14 and everyone's getting fired. But if Deshaun Watson stays healthy and is productive, even with this lessened cast of characters, you've got to assume they're going to have a puncher's chance at winning the division because they do it every bloody year. So, but we've shown that they had a wild comeback against the Bills. Do we put that down to them, or do we put that more down on Josh Allen? I think the pair of us lean more towards the latter. They had Kansas City dead to rights and let them off the hook. So we've seen that this is not a team that can be trusted in the postseason. So they may qualify for it, but they're not going to make any noise seriously when they get there. So I think we'll still be talking about the Houston Texans as the season comes to a close, but we won't be talking about them for much longer after that.
I I think if we're talking about them in week 17, that means the other teams in this division haven't done what I would think they would do. I think they are, in terms of talent, overall talent that is, are the third best team in this division. I think from a head coaching point of view, Colts head coach is better. I think Titans whatever, so the second in terms of that. I don't think they're any good this year, but I do think Bill O'Brien's a good coach and has proven to be a good coach because they keep on making the playoffs. If this is a standard AFC South division where 8-8, 9-7 gets you in, then they're in with a chance. But if it's not, and if it's 10 plus, I can't see them winning 10 games. So I think they will be there not at all because they're not getting they're not getting a wild card. Because as I said, I think they're the third worst team in the league. Let's move on, Neil. Next team, Indianapolis Colts. Old man Phil Rivers, Neil, and his 74 kids are taking that trip. They're not taking a trip. They're not getting in a Winnebago. They're not driving from Florida to Indianapolis. I look, by the way, back on that, before we get on to the big question, I did love the idea that Phil Rivers said, or the news was when Phil Rivers was a free agent, that he wanted to be closer to his family. And that was one of the reasons that the teams he was looking at. And then he went to freaking Indianapolis, which is nowhere near where he lives. Not even close. Like, it's further away than Los Angeles. So, yeah.
It's almost a trope.
It's almost like it was bull crap. And on the Rivers question, Neil, is it enough of an upgrade at quarterback to make the Colts actual contenders this year?
The Colts last year were, I think at one stage, were 6-3.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they led at half-time in 7 of their last 9 games in 2019. Statistically, over the years, if you lead at half-time, you win about 80% of the time. They went 2-5 in the 7 games they led. So you look at where they were. Then Jacoby Brissett got injured, and he came back and he wasn't the same player. So you look where they were. At that halfway stage of last season, the number 2 seed in the AFC was the Indianapolis Colts. But then Jacoby Brissett fell off. Brian Hoyer came in. It was terrible. They lost 2 games they had no business losing. And, the wheels fell off. Now, they bring in old man Rivers, as you say. They don't look to be blessed with receiving talent. They've still got T.Y. Hilton. They've lost Eric Ebron. Got Paris Campbell. But we know that this team's identity, right or wrong, is they want to run the ball. So they had Marlon Mack, and they were good at running the ball last year. But now they've got Jonathan Taylor, who is one of the best running back prospects of the last 20 years or so. And they've got a smart quarterback who knows how to utilise pass catchers in the short to medium areas of the field. It's not a superstar defence. It's good defence in the red zone, which is also where they were good on offence as well. So they're good in defense. They're good inside their own 20. They're good in the opposition 20. If that continues, I think, and they don't ask Philip Rivers to take massive 7-step drops and hurl the ball downfield on his noodle arm, then this team is well coached enough and has just enough talent and is comfortable in its own skin enough that they can win this division and, maybe make some noise in January.
Let's get it out there. I love Phil Rivers. Love him. I hate the fact that Phil Rivers has a spotty playoff history at best, and Eli Manning has won 2 Super Bowls. Everybody, even New York Giants fans who like that, need to be, have a long hard look at themselves. We should all be rooting for Phil Rivers to do well. Fear for this Colts team is, as you said, they loved a close game. And now they have Phil Rivers, who, let's be honest, has contrived so many different ways to lose NFL games while being the Chargers quarterback, whether that be LA or San Diego, that 2-5 might be something they are praying for. They need to run the ball. I think they need to use Jonathan Taylor. I can't stress how much I believe Neil understated the fact that Phil Rivers prefers the short to medium passing game, given the fact, Danny Woodhead and the likes caught 7 bajillion balls off him. I think they could be good. I love the coach. I like the way they play. I think this should be the best team in the AFC South.
Again, it's the argument that I always like to make is they have a playmaker at all 3 levels of their defense. So Malik Hooker, if he can stay healthy, has shown he can be a very, very good safety. Darius Leonard has been great since he came in, and now they go out and trade for DeForest Buckner. So there's your spine. So spine, you can build off that. It is interesting that last season, on early passing down, so first and second, the Colts targeted running backs on first and second down 21% of the time. The league average is 23%. Hi, I'm Phil Rivers. You may remember me from such receiving backs as Danny Woodhead, Darren Sproles, Austin Eckler, Melvin Gordon.
Yeah. Neil talked me through a fantasy sleeper for the Colts.
It'll stun you, but it's the receiving back, Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack, for reasons best known to themselves, the Colts have shown no interest in featuring Mack as a pass catcher. He's got 52 receptions in 3 seasons. Jonathan Taylor, for all his production, he only caught 42 passes in 40 games in college. Nyheim Hines has averaged 3.3 receptions over the last 2 years since he's been in the NFL. Now, he's not going to be a mega superstar producer. In fact, in his 32 career games, he's been a running back once, and that was back in week 4 of 2018. But he's a consistent. He gets 8 to 10 PPR points a game. So if things go south in games, we're going to see that it's going to be Nyheim Hines who's going to be on the field catching the passes, and we've seen that Phil Rivers will feed his receiving back. So he's not someone you need to rush out and get, but at the moment he's going off the board at running back 53. He's a back end of the bench guy, and he's a desperation flex running back 3 option as you go through the season.
Over under for the Colts is 8.5. So Vegas thinks they're better than the Texans. They play Thursday night against Tennessee, or what I like to call the Jacksonville Tennessee game, but it seems to have Indianapolis in it. Again, a few more 9 o'clock games, but outside of that, if you love the Colts, Scott Hansen's your man at 6 p.m. UK time. More likely to be discussed by draftniks in Week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all, Neil?
I just think these are in that annoying category that I think they're definitely going to be in contention Week 17. They could win a playoff game, but I don't see them winning the Super Bowl or even getting to the Super Bowl because they happen to play in the same conference as Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Just to name but 2. I'd love them to do so because Phil Rivers deserves a ring and deserves some postseason success. Wrong time, wrong situation. So for me, they're in that in between. So Week 17, I think they could win this division and probably quite comfortably because they've got the best coach. Yeah. But due to other circumstances beyond their control, they're not winning the Super Bowl.
Oh my goodness. It's like Phil Rivers has done something wrong. He gets a team that is good enough to win 11 games. However, he also comes up against other teams with elite MVP caliber quarterbacks who are better than him and therefore beat him in heartbreaking fashion in some kind of playoff game. Not getting a bye, there's only one this year. They win their division, I believe. But as you said, but they're not a Super Bowl. I don't see them as a Super Bowl contender. Are they the third best team in the division in the conference? I'm not sure. As we said, and as Terez said, I'm still not arguing against New England. And the more I think about the Pittsburgh Steelers when we get to the AFC North, the more I think that is some division and there's some battles they're going to have with Baltimore this year. But we'll get onto that when we do the AFC North. This is the best team in the division. I think they win the division. I think they probably win 11 games, but they're not a Super Bowl contender for me.
Which is a shame.
And it'll be we'll see that sad face again, and people will tell me that Phil Rivers can't win a big game. Well, yeah, Andy Murray couldn't win a big game against Roger Federer. Do you know why? Because Roger Federer is better than Andy Murray. It's just how it works. It's basic logic, people. Next team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah. The big question for the Jacksonville Jags is, when does Jay Gruden become the coach?
Week 5. This team has no identity. It's one of those.
Can we say what week 5 is? So week 1, they're at home to the Colts. Then they're at Tennessee, at home to the Dolphins in what would be the COVID-19 Bowl. Then they play at the Bengals. That's week 4. So what you're saying is, when they lose to the Bengals, 6 o'clock on CBS, that Bengals versus Jags game is there what team are on that? The 15th team? I don't know. The next game is at the Texans, and then they're at home to the Lions. There's some absolutely horrific games that no one should want to see. And then it's a bye week 7. So I'll let you come in, but I'm just going to say they sack Marone at week 6, and then he's in for at the Chargers week 9. Okay,
it's when you want to look at a team and you want to try and gauge what they, how successful they can be, or how much of a train wreck they can be. You have to ask yourself, what does this team do well? And as I say, I sat and thought, and I looked, and I considered, and I pondered, and I still couldn't tell you anything this team does well. They are under no pressure to go out and anoint Gardner Minshew the quarterback of the future, because they're paying him absolute peanuts. He could be great this year. He showed flashes last year that he was good. That's when they used him properly, when they used play action and pre-snap motion, which they didn't do often enough. So they've shown he can be good, but they don't help him too much. Their defense, do you remember the defense in 2017? The players they had on it. They've got
they
Miles.
did their best to get rid of them all.
Yeah, they've got Miles Jack left. That's it. Josh Allen, the good one, is a good young pass rusher, but that's it. Offensively, DJ Chark, had a nice season. They've got, Laviska Shenault could be an interesting playmaker, but they brought in Tyler Eifert at tight end. Am I supposed to be excited about this? They've gone out of their way as an organisation to say how much they despise having anything to do with Leonard Fournette, but they don't bring anyone in to challenge him. Leonard Fournette last year had 21.1 opportunities per game, so that's rushing attempts and targets. He accounted for 44% of their offensive touches. He averaged 4.9 yards per touch, which is 27th among all running backs, and he scored 3 total touchdowns. Do you know how many players in NFL history have had more than 300 touches in a season and scored 3 or less touchdowns?
I don't even want to think.
12. In NFL history, Leonard Fournette put himself in some very, very esteemed company.
That's esteemed in air quotes, by the way, for those who are paying attention.
And the thing is, all the players ahead of him on the list, so players who had more touches and 3, 2, 1 touchdowns, they were all 28 to 30 years old. Leonard Fournette's 24. But you could say some bad luck in the red zone, regression, whatnot. He shouldn't. Statistically, for him to only have 3 touchdowns is baffling. It breaks maths for him to only have 3 touchdowns. But their offense had nothing else other than DJ Chark, and they've not addressed it at all. They've not added to it substantially. They've basically said, They've got some draft picks coming in. They trade away Calais Campbell. Obviously, the big trade to get rid of Jalen Ramsey. They're going to be building for the future. It just won't be with Doug Marrone, and hopefully, for the sake of organisational stability and growth, it won't be with Dave Caldwell either. My God, man. How long what dirt has he got on Shad Khan? He's been there since 2013. They haven't, apart from that one winning season, they have been meh at best and at worst.
Yeah, it's an issue when your owner's not really involved, but the owner's son is also major mates with Dusty Rhodes' son, and is basically a player in the AEW Dynamite TV show for wrestling fans there. Not sure. Good for ratings, not good for the Jacksonville Jags. They are actually wrestling in the car park at the moment of this Jag stadium.
Well, to be fair, even without fans not being in the stadium, they could probably do that anyway, because I don't know anyone who'd want to go.
No, true. You're saying that with all the COVID restrictions, you don't want to go in that hot tub they used to have?
I just don't want to go and watch this team play.
No. Fantasy sleeper, Neil?
People can talk themselves into Leonard Fournette if they want, depending on where he falls and the makeup of your team, by all means. They've tried to get rid of him, they just can't quit him, so he may get some decent volume. Person I like is Laviska Shenault. If you actually look at some of his comps in terms of coming out of college, so in terms of his college production, his 40 time, his weight, his height, or things like that, some players he is similar to, and this is according to the Box Score Scout app over at RotoViz. So these are players, who got similar career receiving yards market share, receiving touchdown market share, final season receiving yard market share, things like that. So these are players who the sim score is 100 for said player. So Shenault has 100. So going down to players with sim scores of 63, we see names like AJ Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, the good Michael Thomas, DeAndre Hopkins, N'Keal Harry, Mohamed Sanu. These are interesting comps. A lot of these players have been relevant in fantasy for a number of seasons. Now, if you look at the Jaguars, as I say, their passing game, their defense is terrible. We don't know what's going to happen with Yannick Ngakoue, but presumably he's not going to play for the Jaguars again.
No.
So, we don't know what's happening with this team on defense. Presumably no one's going to turn up for that either. So they're going to have to air it out an awful lot more. So you've got DJ Chark, and then you've got Laviska Shenault. If you're getting someone who's going to be a wide receiver 2 on a team that's going to have to pass the ball an awful lot, and you can wait till wide receiver 73 to pick him up, I like that value, especially considering the positive comps from the Box Score Scout.
Neil, the win total is 4.5. I think it's the lowest one in the league. Draftniks week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all?
Draftniks, tank for Trevor, or take the field for Fields, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, well, they're not playing this year, so yeah, okay. They are doing their classic Thursday night game. However, it is the COVID Bowl against Miami rather than against Tennessee, which is, I'm not going to lie, disappointing. This is the worst team in the league, and yeah. I think they have the number 1 pick. So yeah, 3 wins for them, please.
And we've seen though in the past that when they have a very high draft pick, they usually do a very good job with it.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. Little hint for you though, Jags: don't take a wide receiver in the first round. You suck at it.
Yeah. See Detroit Lions early 2000s for details. Neil, final team in this division, the Tennessee Titans. Big question for the Titans. Do we get regular season Ryan Tannehill or postseason Tannehill this season?
Well, the argument would be that they cannot possibly be as run heavy as they were last year. Cool. Yeah, of course not. Of course not. We've seen what happens to running backs who have the level of work that Derrick Henry had last year. We've seen what happens the year after. It falls off. But this team was very clever in how they played on offense when Ryan Tannehill came in, they did this incredibly weird thing. They catered to the strength of the players they had.
A weird concept.
I may have to explain that to you, but it's what good teams do. It's one thing. One weird thing as well about the Titans. They've gone 9-7 4 years in a row. They are the only team in NFL history to ever go 9-7 4 years in a row.
If we think about it, that is really difficult to do.
Because basically that means for 4 seasons they have gone over that. So we say there's 5 games maybe in 4 seasons that could have flipped it out one way or the other. But they've gone 9-7 every year. They're a good team. They have some good players and they have a good system. Do I think that system is sustainable for long-term success in the year 2020? No, I don't. I think Ryan Tannehill can be serviceable. We've seen that players, once they get away from Adam Gase, can still perform. Derrick Henry, as we said, he's a workhorse. He's got an awful lot of work, tread on his tires already, but he's a young 4-year player, as it were, because he was only a starter really for a year and a half. AJ Brown is a beast. He is a fully grown man. Jonnu Smith, I've loved from afar for many, many years. Their defense is good, but it's not great. There's not many people or play faces on this defense where you'd look at and say, nailed on stud. They did trade away Jarrell Casey for a ham sandwich again, which is slightly odd. They're a good team, but I don't think they're a great team. I think last year everything went right for them.
They're a definition of solid, right? I think they're the definition of solid. And the problem they're going to have is, 9-7 and whatever, and they're going to be in that similar position again. And how do you get over the top? You know what I mean? Like, the NFL doesn't want you to be 9-7 4 years on the run. It wants you to be 3-13, then 13-3. And they're not that, so it'll be tough.
It'll be interesting because this team's offense, as I say, is not particularly exciting. It's effective and efficient. And I think an awful lot of credit needs to go there to their offensive coordinator with a name like a Cockney comedian, Arthur Smith. So you just wonder if they can replicate the success they had last year this year, or maybe do even better. Does he start to get consideration for head coaching jobs? And if that's the case, that means then that this team, as bizarre as it sounds, automatically, weirdly, then becomes like a conveyor belt for head coaches. Because obviously their last offensive coordinator, whose name escapes me, is the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Why does his name escape me? Matt LaFleur. The Flower. So it's weird, but stranger things have happened. He could come in and show, that he can run his scheme and he is a leader of men. They're just a solid team. They don't have glaring weaknesses, but the lows aren't very low and the highs aren't particularly high. They're a good team.
Yeah. Who's the fantasy sleeper, Neil?
Fantasy sleeper is Jonnu Smith, and I'll never hear a bad word said against Jonnu Smith. He's at worst the number 2 option in the passing game, behind AJ Brown. Ludicrously efficient. He's had to compete in the last few years with Delaney Walker, but Walker's gone now. So if they do have to open up a little bit and pass some more, we've seen that he has a good chemistry with Ryan Tannehill from an adjusted yards per attempt point of view. He's going as the tight end 17. Yes, and more yes.
Over under for them is 8.5, same as the Colts. More likely to be discussed by draftniks in week 17 in the Super Bowl or not at all. Go.
I think they're going to be in contention. So wild card ish. I don't think they're running away with this division. They're also not bad enough that they're going to be talked about. They're going to be in the contention for a high draft pick. They are the positive side of not at all. Because again, I don't see them winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think they're a week 17 conversation because, I think they will be thereabouts with the Colts towards the last few weeks of the season. The last 2 games are at the Packers and at the Texans, which could be concerning. But I think they're a 9-7 team. If the Colts are a 10-6, 11-5 team, then they're still going to be involved in Week 17, right? So I think they'll still be discussed as a playoff team. Do I think they can make the playoffs? I'm not sure. I don't see them as a double-digit win team, and I think you're going to need double digits to get to the playoffs in the AFC. So I think they're discussed in Week 17, but they're not a Super Bowl contender. I don't think they're the best team in this division, so I don't know how they're getting to the Super Bowl.
No, they're a good team.
Yeah, but I think they're a fine team. That's the problem. If they were good, I think that's okay. I think they're a fine team. And in the NFL, that's not what you want. That is when you're 17 and that girl you fancy says you make a really good husband. You know, I'm so happy we're best mates. Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Don't want to know that. You don't want to be fine in the NFL. You want to stink or be the best. Being in the middle is awful.
So we're saying the Tennessee Titans are in the friend zone.
The friend zone? They are the friend zone of the NFL right now.
I think being called the friend zone of the NFL is probably an upgrade on being called the Titans.
True. Maybe we'll tell Dan. That is it. So, Neil, I think we're in agreement. Jags stink. Texans next, then Titans, then Colts.
Yes, but, you know, if you told me it went Colts, Texans, Titans, I wouldn't be stunned. If you told me it was Colts, Titans, Texans, I wouldn't be stunned. This is a competitive division and has been pretty much since its inception. Whereas, you know, if you look, the Texans are the dominant team in it in terms of who wins it, but I just don't think we can say with any degree of certainty that they are going to be dominant this year.
No, absolutely not. Neil, that's it for this week. Where can people catch you before we're back again next week?
Before we come back next week, you can find me on Twitter at ndutton13. This week I've written about Davante Adams, about why I think he could be the wide receiver 1. That's over at Number 5. I've written a couple of pieces for Ravens Wire, including 7 free agents the Ravens could still pick up, which is actually only 6 because one of them just signed for the Seahawks, or the Falcons, sorry. That was Darqueze Dennard. Then also I've written continuing the series on the look at the Ravens' opponents this year. I've done one about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've also done one about the Indianapolis Colts, and obviously the deep-seated hatred that there is between the people of Baltimore and the Colts organisation, in particularly one Mr. Irsay. And also I've done the first in one of my favourite series for Rotoviz. It's The Guy Behind the Guy, which is a look at the Rotoviz writers' favourite backup/player behind other people on their roster. The first one is about running backs. So that's 4 Rotoviz writers' favourite backup running backs who they think if the incumbent starter would only get out of the way, these people could be superstars.
Fantastic, Neil, fantastic. Next week, NFC South, where we get to talk Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. What a parallel universe we live in. But there you go. I am at Mainz7. Combined, we are at Waxing Lyrical. Again, we'd like to thank Terez Paylor for joining us this week. But on that note, these top guys are out.